Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games, and today we're going to be doing issues 21 to 30 of Warhammer Imperium Painted. Now issue 21 and 22 were one section of Skitarii. The sprues are spread out over two issues. So in issue 21, of course, you are actually shown what you're going to be getting, and you're given a bit of an introduction to the Adeptus Mechanicus, which is kind of a faction closely allied with the Imperium. Basically, they're the hub of technology for basically the Imperium. Any research that's done is done there. You have, of course, a tiny little story, Crimson Doom, which is something I actually really like about these magazines, is the little stories tell an awful lot more for the lore, or give you a taste for the lore a little bit better than just kind of cold text. You, of course, have the build guide in issue 21, and you have data sheets, of course, for some of your previous models. Now, the actual game in issue 21, of course, doesn't have the Skitarii, because you only have half of them, so it's called Orbital Defense, and it's between the Necrons and the Marines. In issue 22, you have, of course, a bit more lore on the Adeptus Mechanicus, something on the Sautek dynasty, another story on Crimson Tomb, and of course how to paint your Skitarii Rangers. And finally, of course, you get to use them in this issue with the supplied kind of battle sheet, and you get a taste to see how good these guys are and what they are actually like. Now, the miniatures themselves this is my first time painting Skitarii, and I have to say they are beautiful miniatures. I mean, absolutely stunning minis, but it took a long time to kind of put them together and to paint them because they're so detailed. I mean, I'm going to show you the butchered paint job I've done here, but there's a lot of details in these minis. So, I mean, this is, quite frankly, an amazing job from Games Workshop. Now, one thing I wanted to show you as well is the base here is Martian Iron Crust, whereas the base here is Martian Iron Earth. Now, I bought the two of them just to try it, basically to give a Martian texture, but Martian Iron Earth I think is the better one because it kind of cracks and it gives this very random kind of surface of Mars kind of base pattern, which is very nice. You paint the base itself corn red, which is this color here, and you just glop this stuff on top of it, and it gives a lovely based texture. The minis themselves, like I said, they took a long time to paint because they're very, very, very detailed, but also very busy to put together. I mean, it wasn't an exceptionally hard build, and it was my first time putting them together, so I wouldn't be as familiar with these guys as I would be with Space Marines, or even now at this stage, Necrons. But a beautiful model to build, a little difficult to paint, but to be honest with you, it's worth the effort because, like, I'm only an average painter, but I'm actually quite happy with how these guys came out. You know, they stand out quite well. The only thing I will say is if you go for this color scheme and you follow the Warhammer paint guide, it'll take about 4 hours per miniature because you have to kind of do layers to build up the paint scheme. So like the coat paint, I believe, is an Evil Sun's Scarlet. So in order to kind of build it up, you have to base it with another color and then kind of put it on top of this. And it's the same thing with the underside of the coat, that it took 4 layers of paint to get it done. But nevertheless, I mean, I'm very happy with how they came out, but I don't know if I'd ever be able to build a whole army of these guys because it's not like Space Marines where, you know, it's nearly a uniform color. There's a lot going on with these guys. I mean, especially with the backpack, with kind of little bits and pieces, such as kind of halogen bulbs and things like that kind of coming out of it. It's a weird mesh of technology. I mean, the weapons especially have a kind of a nice Wild West kind of aesthetic to them, where there seems to be kind of decor on the weapons, reminiscent of a kind of, you know, a Western lever action rifle. And the backpacks as well have kind of, it's an interesting, weird kind of set of tech. The other thing about these guys is, excuse me, the other thing about these guys is, it's quite grim, is that they've replaced nearly all their limbs with robotic ones. And so, I mean, like, this guy, okay, he's kept his hands, but his feet are kind of, they're robotic, you know. So, I mean, these guys, I know in the lore they're kind of constantly replacing themselves with bits of weapons, but it's just weird kind of how much they've butchered themselves. Now this one I thought was great fun to paint. Like you see, it's a weird old Western kind of aesthetic with a kind of like a long shot rifle, but with a bit of kind of, you know, weird tech and a carrying handle on top. But this one I actually loved painting because it just stands out, and it's reminiscent of a kind of a fire support group in a section, that it's like this guy lays down the heavy fire whilst the rest of the lads move, or, you know, if they come at him, he's the best one to fire back. And you can see here as well the Martian iron crust, the effect it gives. It's a wonderful base paint, and if you do focus on Skitarii, I would recommend that you get it, because it gives a very good looking base for very little effort, and it really kind of gives the impression that you're on the surface of Mars. So that was issues 21 and 22 of Warhammer Imperium. Issue 23 of Warhammer Imperium, of course, is the Canoptic Spider, which was a really cool mini to paint. And of course, here you have some of the lore on it, some details on the thing. It seemed to be part of a larger group called the Canoptic Constructs. So it gives you some more information and background on them. You have some more lore for the Adeptus Mechanicus, given that you just finally started collecting them in the last 2 issues. You have the how to build guide, how to paint, and of course you have the usual data sheets for the spider and the swarms. And the actual mission, of course, includes the Canoptic Spider, where it, along with a section of a section of Necrons, are storming some Space Marines in order to get a battery. So you get to try it out. And the miniature itself, I have to say, was great fun to paint. I really enjoyed this one. It's a creepy looking thing with, 8 legs. It's literally a spider. It was simple enough to build, actually. And I just had fun painting it. It was very straightforward. I just did a dry brush on the metal to kind of give a metallic effect, but I was quite happy to kind of keep everything else kind of fresh and not so beat up, because, well, this thing kind of reanimates things. So I thought it'd be in good nick itself. I just put in Tesseract Glow into the grooves here to kind of just give that kind of effect. One thing I will say is the base here, normally I like to just slot them on and leave them to it, but he's very bum heavy, so he wasn't staying on. So normally I don't glue them, but I decided to just glue this guy to it. And just be wary of it, because I'm sure he'll stick the first 2 or 3 times, but after that you'll have to glue him. So I'd suggest glue him to the actual base the first time and leave it there so he'll settle, and you're not having to prop him up and let the thing settle overnight. But otherwise, I have to say this was a really cool little mini to build, very straightforward, and it stands out in the battlefield because it's a spider with lots of legs. And all I can say is I had real fun with this. Issue 24 is a paint issue, so you get Rakarth flesh and you get a shade called Nuln Oil, which is basically a godsend to most kind of part-time painters. So this issue focuses mainly on the game itself, so you get some more information, of course, about the Skitarii, you get some more information about the Necrons, and you get a bit of an introduction to the Tyranids, which are another faction in the 40k universe. It goes into more details on how to kind of paint the Ultramarines, so like the Rakarth flesh paint you would use to kind of paint the patchments, and then you use Agrex Earthshade or sometimes Nuln Oil to actually shade it up. So it just allows you, if you're following the paint guide in this religiously, to kind of dress up your Space Marines that a little bit more. It also goes into objectives and victory points, so you get a bit more advanced rules in the actual end game on this. So it's a good issue if you're brand new to it, because it kind of gives you a better lowdown of the whole game, and it gives you some kind of cutout victory points here as well at the end. Issue 25 comes with 5 Necron Immortals. Now these are kind of like Special Forces Necrons. They'd be kind of the elite, and they're slightly bigger than their contemporaries. So obviously it goes into details in them. It goes into the Royal Court, so you get some more background lore on the Necrons. It goes into the Imperium itself, what sort of civilization it is, and Ultramarines, which is basically kind of a sub-empire within the Empire, but they would be kind of the the poster boys for 40k, so it gives you some background information on them. You have the usual how to build, how to paint, and you also get, of course, the data sheets on the Royal Warden and the Immortals. Now, the Royal Warden was something I think we got in an earlier issue, and of course the mission, playable mission in this, of course, is using the Immortals and the Space Marines in an actual battle, so you get an idea of what they're like. The minis themselves are very interesting. Sorry, clipped that poor fella. They're slightly bigger than the other Necrons, so as a result, they're a bit easier to paint. Yeah, like as you can see, like it's a big, heavy version of the Gauss rifle that they have. The only main difference is that they recommend you paint a silver stripe or a white stripe here on the head to kind of differentiate them from the other Necrons. But as you can see, you can kind of tell anyway because they're just that bit bigger. They're not beat up like other kind of Necron infantry. These guys are fairly in one piece and fairly sinister looking. This guy, I don't know how I managed it, but he looked like he was tired carrying this thing. It's like he's been humping this thing all day and he's just kind of hunched over, fed up of life. It just struck me as funny with this particular build, the way he came out, that he's just like, he's sick of carrying the GPMG all day and all night. But apart from that, the rest of them have interesting poses, kind of battle-ready type of things like that. They were fun and easy to paint because Necrons, God bless them, are very easy to paint. And I found that, especially with the weapons, that I'm having an easier time of it if it's just kind of based in the bad and black and given a dry brush of lead belcher. This was the last time. I've been having trouble with the weapons here. I just put Moot Green into the kind of the connection points here to kind of save myself time because it was taking a very long time to kind of use Tesseract Glow. But I was given a bit of advice in the comments from someone titled That One Guy and another man called Keen, who advised me to paint it white and then put Tesseract Glow on top of it. And I didn't do it for these ones, but I used them in a latter issue of the Necrons, and I found it made a great difference. However, if you don't have those paints, a simple Moot Green, and you just kind of drop it along the side there, I found kind of did the job for me anyway. But yeah, the Necron Immortals are interesting little minis. You get 5 of them in this issue, and they would be the Necron Special Forces. Now, issue 26 was a very interesting issue because you get the Tech Priest Dominus, which was a fantastic little mini. And of course, this issue is literally all about him. He's kind of like an officer or a kind of a lore keeper for the Adeptus Mechanicus. He was difficult enough to build, like there's a lot of little bitty parts on it, but it is an absolutely stunning miniature. And as you can see here, even in the paint guide, there's a lot of detail on him. You of course get the stats for the character and some more kind of basic core rules for the larger game, and this is the second mission you get to use with the Skitarii, because they're being led by the Tech Priest Dominus here, and to fight against the Necrons, and it's Cleanse Sector Epta. But enough about that. The miniature itself, I have to say, was very fun to paint. It took a bit of time, but I'm only an average painter, but it comes out really well, you know. I mean, it's a fantastic little mini, and that's the Martian Iron Earth as well on the base. So basing it was about the easiest thing to do. I will warn you that these little bits here fall off. I have already had to glue this guy back on, but it's a miniature that just stands out on the battlefield. I mean, it's a fantastic looking thing. It's very creepy because he doesn't have legs. He has, I don't know, spider legs or something. I mean, his entire bottom half, it just seems to be kind of claws. But no, a fantastic little mini. And what I liked about it as well is they give the idea of a very old kind of withered hand here, which is about, I'd say, the only human part of him left, because everything else seems to be just robotic. There's 2 kind of liquid pool things on top here, but it's a mini that just stands out, and it's a fantastic looking thing. I mean, the detail on it is magnificent. And yeah, he has, not only does he have oodles of kind of claw legs, he's several arms. I mean, he has an arm here, a little claw thing here, a big bolter weapon arm here, and his normal natural hand here with a quaint walking stick, which I don't know why he needs it, but I suppose it's just kind of a symbol of authority or something like that. But aside from that, it's just a fantastic looking mini, and one well worth getting, issue 26, just to get it, because even if you never really wanted to collect the Skitarii but wanted to try painting one, this is a wonderful painting challenge and well worth it. I had great fun with that particular mini. Now, issue 27 comes with the Hemotrope Reactor, which is a piece of terrain. There's a bit of information here, of course, on it. Excuse me, but because it's a bit of terrain, this issue is focused a lot more on kind of the lore as opposed to the actual piece itself. You get, of course, a bit of the history of the Imperium prior to the 40k, the kind of the history of the universe. You have, of course, how to build, how to paint. There's also extra rules references here, so you get a bit more for the core rules. So it focuses on the kind of charge phase, the psychic phase, and whatnot. And the actual mission itself is called Power Struggle, in which Necrons and Skitarii are fighting over the actual reactor itself. Now, it's a lovely piece of terrain, but in the guide it tells you to kind of glue this bit on. But you will get 2 of these in this issue, and I actually have 2 from Warhammer Conquest. And what I opted to do with it was to kind of glue it on different sides so that you can kind of join it together and make one big kind of piece of terrain. So with this one, I decided not to actually glue it, so I could kind of make one long kind of piece of terrain. And I'll probably do the same thing with the next Hemotrope Reactor on it. It's a nice chunky piece of terrain, but as you can see, this is my 3rd one now, and I'll soon be painting a 4th one at some stage, so I'm kind of sick of painting it. But that said, my own kind of repetitive experiences aside, it's a fun and easy paint. The hardest part, of course, is the white, because white is a notoriously difficult paint to apply. But what I'm tending to use these days is a paint called Grey Sear. It's not quite white, but it's white enough for my purposes. And yeah, it's a lot of little bitty detail that you can kind of colour up to your own heart's effect. I mean, if you just want to paint the whole thing lead bedsure and plonk it on the battlefield, you can. It's up to yourself what you do with it, but it is a very good terrain piece. It does add to the battlefield in a big way, but if, like me, you have Conquest and you're also collecting Imperium, you're going to be tripping over these things by the end of the 80 issues. Nevertheless, it is a good issue, and it's a great way to get cheap terrain, which does work very well for your battlefield. And there are kind of battlefield rules to these things. So, I mean, we all like to focus on the actual combat minis themselves, but the terrain is as much an essential part of the aesthetic as the actual soldiers are. Now, issues 28 and 29 come with 2 different sprues. Basically, it's a section of Necrons along with some Scarabs, but because you've had these issues or had these miniatures before, the issues themselves are able to focus a little bit more on the lore. So you have, of course, details about the Necron warriors and their relentless march and kind of what they're like. Some more on the Skitarii legions. You also have the usual how to build guide, which is handy just in case you pick this issue out of order. You get some more of the core rules in this issue, going into terrain features and things like that, which is handy from the last issue. You also have an extra mission, which is Counter-Strike, and you have some data sheets as well on certain factions. This is the second part of the sprue, and of course, again, it goes into more of the lore of Mars. It also goes into Gene Stealer cults. Now, there's no Tyranids in these issues, but the Gene Stealer cults and the Terrans are kind of a big, huge threat to the whole 40k universe. So it's nice to see some information on that. It goes into the kind of the Space Marines, fire support, things like that, and kind of there's a story here into the Warm from the Blood Angels, and of course it focuses on these guys fighting against the Tyranids. So it's an interesting little story, and like I said, it's one of my favorite things about these issues. You have the usual build and paint. It goes into more of the core rules, and it explains the data sheets a little bit better, and of course it gives you data sheets on the Librarian and the Aggressor Squad, and of course the actual mission is called Valkyrie Down. So let's have a look at the actual minis themselves. Now they're the same sprues from the previous issue, But what I did different with this is, and thank you again to the guys in the comments that advised me on this, I just painted this white and I put a Tesseract glow on it. Now I don't think the camera is picking it up, but it actually, in actual real life, it looks quite nice. It has a much more subtle kind of green glow effect than my previous effort did. So a big thank you to that one guy and to Keen for pointing out this to me. It was certainly a big time saver, but also it's the correct way to do it. So a big thank you, lads, for telling me how to do this in the comments. But the Necrons themselves, like I said, they're the same guys in the previous issues. What I liked about this as well, though, is the sprues give you options. So you can actually, just because you get the same 2 sprues again doesn't mean that you're going to have the same Necrons again, because you have the options with every Necron body to adjust the weapon. Now I decided to stick with the actual build guide, but you can actually swap the weapons on these fellas. So if you wanted to have kind of more unique Necrons, you can do that, and I thought that's a pretty cool little way for Games Workshop to have done it. The scarabs themselves are just, they're fun, they're great little things, and they give a great sense of flight as well. I already spoke about these things, but you get 4 of them, and they're just, I love the little scarabs, and I think the way that Games Workshop are kind of sculpting their minis these days is just phenomenal. They're doing amazing work. Like even the Necrons, like this fella, his head is off kilter, and I know it seems a bit wrong, but I just thought it was funny. I like it because he didn't quite reassemble himself well, so he's still a bit kind of skewed. I mean, if you wanted to have a bit of fun, you could kind of make it. He has to roll 1 higher to actually shoot with the rifle or something. It's up to yourself if you want to do narrative play, but it's same thing with this guy. His head is kind of battered off. I mean, his jaw is missing, so you do get nice little touches like that where they're battle beaten and not quite fully assembled. Whereas if you contrast it with, of course, with the Immortal, who is bigger, these guys are all in one proper piece, whereas these guys are the poor line infantry that I don't think anyone really loves or cares for, so they're just slugging along all the time. But yep, issues 28 and 29 were 10 Necrons and 4 Scarabs. Now, issue 30 is a paint issue, but it's a good issue as well because it comes with some more information on the Adeptus Mechanicus. It also explains successor chapters. So one of the great things about this hobby is it's creative. You can do whatever you want. It has some suggestions here for successive chapters of the Ultramarines. These would be guys who would follow Ultramarine rules but would have their own paint scheme, or maybe 1 or 2 of their own little rules. But you can also make up whatever you want with them. So you can make any successor chapter you want. So this is where kind of a great creative aspect of the hobby comes in. And you can see all these different kind of paint schemes there for your Space Marines. The same thing applies to the Necrons. You have different dynasties, so you don't have to stick with the actual paint scheme that you've been seeing me use. I mean, this fella, of course, is covered in blood, which is lovely, but it gives a nice kind of horrible kind of red sinister color to them. So it's you don't have to stick to the paint scheme you see in the cover. It gives you some more information on the Imperium and the idea of a dark age, whereas in the future basically technology is viewed with suspicion. So people are very kind of, even though they're technologically advanced, they're quite backwards in terms of their approach to life. Very fearful, very suspicious, very racist, very xenophobic. So it's not a nice place to live. We have here, of course, how to paint Ultramarine details. So there's a big how to paint guide, given that it's a paint issue. You have some more data sheets on the Scorpec destroyers and the plasma sight, and the actual. You get some more rules as well to the actual core game, but the battle in this is called No Mercy, and it's an interesting one because, sorry, it's not called No Mercy, it's called No Mercy, but it's a decisive engagement. But what's interesting about it is there's a lot of forces in it. So in this one, you play with the Overlord, 10 Necron Warriors, 3 Scorpec Destroyers, 1 Canoptic Plasmacyte, and for the Space Marines, you get 1 Lieutenant, 5 Assault Intercessors, and 3 Aggressors. So it's because your collection is building up, you can actually have a bit more interesting battles with it. And this is everything you get in issues 21 to 30. So I have to say it's certainly an interesting 10 issues to have gotten. If I was to pick a favorite miniature that I've painted, it would be between this guy and I'd say this guy. So these three miniatures were the most fun to paint. This guy I think steals the show because he's just so elaborate. This was just fun. This was a very easy, fun build and paint. And this guy, I think he's cool because it looks like he's the part of the fire support group. But you do get an awful lot of minis with these 10 issues, and yeah, no, I have to say I'm very happy with what I am getting so far from Warhammer Imperium, and issues 21 to 30 were good value, good fun to paint, and I'm very happy to have these in my collection. So because of that, I will more than likely get issues 31 to 40 and paint them and show them here with you as well. So thanks again for watching. This is Sean from The Lucky Roll. If you enjoyed these videos, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck, God bless. And if you do have painting tips, please do leave them in the comments, because the advice I got on the white with the Tesseract glow was brilliant. So thanks very much, lads. Good luck and God bless.